And let's start with some international news first, where Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has confirmed after the G7 summit that he had warned Donald Trump that his country will impose retaliatory tariffs on US goods from the 1st of July. Trump retaliated to Trudeau's comments and called him weak and dishonest. The physical bonhomie between US President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron was paired at the G7 summit in Canada. Tensions arose between the two leaders leading up to the G7 summit as Macron tweeted his displeasure with Trump over the tariffs. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that the leaders of the G7 countries will stress the importance of rules-based trade in a joint communique, but there were still differences between Europe and the United States over the issue. The British Prime Minister Theresa May has welcomed a G7 statement that recognized the need to maintain sanctions on Russia after US President Donald Trump floated the suggestion that the country be allowed back into the group. The British Prime Minister Theresa May has met with the Italian Prime Minister at the G7 summit in Canada as the United States and the European Union have clashed over trade tariffs, with US President Donald Trump complaining that his country has been very unfairly treated in trade by the European Union for several decades. And also, Italy's new Prime Minister said that he has supported US President Donald Trump's call for Russia to rejoin the G7 summit. Conte played by the rules of the summit but broke with the European Union line when calling for a review of European Union sanctions on Russia. The G7 nation leaders and other dignitaries gathered for breakfast on the second day of the G7 summit for Gender Equality Advisory Council that has a declared mandate to promote a transformative G7 agenda and also support leaders and ministers in ensuring that gender equality and gender-based analysis are integrated across all themes, activities and outcomes of Canada's G7 presidency. Now, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has posed for photographs along with 5 other G7 nation leaders with heads from the international community as part of the 2-day G7 summit in Quebec. Several spouses of G7 leaders were hosted by Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, wife of the Canadian Prime Minister, on the sidelines of the G7 meeting in Canada. Now, Oxfam, a global humanitarian relief organization, depicted G7 leaders in huge heads made out of fiberglass to bring awareness on climate change. Hundreds of people marched on the eve of the Group of 7 meeting. Demonstrators protested against world leaders who they said had ignored the interests of regular people. They also called for attention to climate change, questioning the amount of money that was being spent on the US military and ending war worldwide. The demonstrators threw flares in the Quebec city on the eve of the Group of 7 meeting in protest against world leaders. The security force of almost about 10,000 police and military personnel were stationed to make sure that they were kept far from the summit. Ten people were arrested in connection with the anti-G7 protests on Thursday and Friday, but the scattered demonstrations were largely peaceful as authorities closed off streets and responded to any protests with ranks of police in riot gear. Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed the leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization member states on the second day of the summit. The leaders held a restricted session. Indian Foreign Ministry officials have said that the Chinese President Xi Jinping called the WION summit held last April as a new starting point to promote its bilateral ties with India. Xi also hosted Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for talks in China on the sidelines of the SCO meeting. Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping and held a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the SCO summit. Trade and investment between India and China dominated the talks. The two leaders also signed two agreements as well. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping committed to continue improving ties between the two countries. The Chinese leader has accepted Prime Minister Narendra Modi's invitation for yet another informal summit, but this will take place in India next year, like the two had in Wuhan just a few weeks ago, to build upon the progress. President Xi Jinping said that China is willing to strengthen high-level exchange and strategic communication with Pakistan while meeting his Pakistani counterpart Mamnoon Hussain in the Qingdao city. The Mamnoon Hussain is presently in Qingdao to attend the 18th SCO summit. China and Tajikistan have also pledged to deepen comprehensive strategic partnership and expand on cooperation to benefit the two people. Xi Jinping made the remarks while meeting with his Tajik counterpart Emomali Rahman on the sidelines of the 18th SCO summit in China. The presidents of China, Russia and Mongolia have pledged to strengthen trilateral cooperation during their meeting in Qingdao. The trilateral meeting was chaired by the Chinese President Xi Jinping and attended by Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Mongolian President as well. The Chinese President Xi Jinping and other leaders of the SCO member states, observer states as well as heads of international organizations watched a gala show consisting of a large-scale light show, art performances and a fireworks display in Qingdao. The Russian President Vladimir Putin tried his hand at cooking some local dishes with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Vegetable pancakes and baozi dumplings, a Chinese delicacy, were in fact on the menu for the pair, who tasted the dishes and also watched them being prepared. The US President Donald Trump has said that any agreement with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the summit will be a spur-of-the-moment, underscoring the uncertain outcome of what he has called a mission of peace. US President Donald Trump left from the G7 summit before the meeting ended as he headed to Singapore for a meeting with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The main issue for the summit in Singapore is the US demand for North Korea to abandon a nuclear weapons program that now threatens the United States. The barriers have been set up as Singapore prepares for the arrival of US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ahead of their meeting. Security around the two luxury hotels where the two leaders are going to stay has also been beefed up. An old colonial fort turned tourist attraction in Singapore has been decorated with its cannons with bouquets from the cannon guns. And this has been done to symbolize peace ahead of the summit between US and the North Korean leaders. The hundreds of South Korean activists held a candlelit vigil in central Seoul, calling for a successful summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Impersonators of Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump surprise guests with a chili crab summit at a seafood restaurant in Singapore ahead of the anticipated summit between the two world leaders. The customers at the restaurant flocked to the duo and also had their photos taken while they were eating. The peace talks between the Republic of Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea have ignited a land-buying frenzy along South Korea's heavily fortified border area. The Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has said that he wants more talks with Russia about what he has called the illegal US withdrawal from the Iranian nuclear deal. But Donald Trump said last month in Washington that he was withdrawing from what he had called a horrible one-sided deal and will be reimposing US economic sanctions on Iran. Scotland's nationalist leader Nicola Sturgeon has urged impatient separatists to quell their desire for a swift new referendum on independence from the rest of Britain. In a speech, Sturgeon has urged the activists instead to focus on convincing others of the case for breaking away. Palestinians in the cities of Khan Yunis and also Rafah have attended a funeral procession for two protesters who were shot dead in clashes with the Israeli troops on Friday during protests at the Gaza Strip. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is presently facing stiff opposition for the presidential and also the legislative polls on the 24th of June, holds a massive meeting campaign in a stadium with Ankara with thousands of supporters. The Brazil's Workers' Party holds an event to launch the pre-nomination campaign of ex-President Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva ahead of October's presidential election. Police in the Kurdistan region of Iraq have said that a 20-year-old Iraqi man had in fact admitted to the rape and murder of a 14-year-old Susanna Fellman in Germany, where the case has stoked the immigration debate. The 20-year-old Iraqi suspect of raping and killing a 14-year-old girl in Germany last month has been extradited from Iraq and arrived back to Germany. The suspect in this case, who has been identified as Ali Bashar, arrived in Frankfurt on a direct flight from Erbil and was transported by helicopter to the police headquarters in Wiesbaden. The Russian historians have raised concerns and authorities are playing down Stalin-era crimes after they learned that the police are in fact destroying the archive records of a victim of the Soviet dictator's purges, citing a previously unknown government directive. The British Royal Air Force Red Arrow's pilots performed a flypast in London during the annual Trooping of the Colours ceremony. The ceremony marked the Queen's 92nd birthday and was attended by several senior royals, including Prince Charles and also the Duke and the Duchess of Cambridge. And Prince Harry and also his new wife, Meghan Markle, now known as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, attended the annual Trooping of the Colours ceremony. This is the first time that the couple have attended the Queen's birthday celebrations together. The Pope Francis warned that climate change in fact is destroying humanity and has called on energy leaders to help the world to convert to clean fuels to avert catastrophe. The typhoon Evinyar has brought torrential downpour into South China's Guangdong province, causing 5 deaths, and also 1 person has been reported as missing on Friday. More than 210,000 people across the province have been affected due to the flooding, and local authorities have evacuated nearly about 72,000 residents to safer places. Guatemala is delivering relief goods to people affected by the powerful eruption of a highly active volcano near the country's capital. Several thousand people have been affected and are now living in more than 20 shelters near the Fuego volcano, and 140 tons of relief goods are on their way to be delivered to the people. The port of Douala, the largest in Central Africa, has launched a wreck removal operation to brush up the harbour's image and also boost business for Cameroon. The weather in New Delhi, the capital of India, took a drastic turn when strong winds and dust storms followed by moderate to heavy rains lashed the Indian capital. Due to the inclement weather, about 28 flights were diverted from New Delhi. India has registered a 22% decline in the number of women who die during childbirth. The Health Ministry has said that the maternal mortality ratio of India has in fact declined from 167 in 2011-2013 to 130 for the years 2014 to 2016. The hundreds of mango lovers thronged a mango festival to relish the taste of different varieties of the fruit in India's eastern Siliguri city. More than 300 varieties of mangoes from eastern West Bengal state, Bangladesh and Nepal were exhibited at the 3-day festival. The right-wing group has staged a protest against Bollywood actress Priyanka Chopra after an episode in Quantico showed an Indian nationalist trying to frame Pakistan in a terror attack. Now, this group, which is identified as the Hindu Sena, burned down posters of Priyanka Chopra and also raised slogans against the actress in New Delhi. Thousands of people took to the streets to support the LGBT rights in cities across Europe, with marches waving rainbow flags and condemning discrimination in all its forms. Peaceful parades took place across European cities, including the capitals of Italy, Greece, Latvia, Croatia, Bulgaria, Romania and Poland. Thousands of people took to the streets of Rome to celebrate Gay Pride just days after Italy's new families minister caused a storm by saying that homosexual families do not legally exist. The sheep shearers participating in a competition in France attempted to shear more than 2,000 sheep in 24 straight hours. Competitors will be attempting to shave a total of 2,500 sheep by the contest's end, meaning that they would have about 50 seconds to shear each sheep. The oldest footprint fossil on Earth so far was found recently in the Three Gorges area in central China's Hubei province, serving as an important clue to understanding the origins of Bilateral with paired appendages. The deaf white cat named Achilles is soon to begin his work as Russia's official soothsayer for the World Cup, following in the tentacle prints of Paul the octopus, who became a star in 2010. Paul had predicted winners for that year's World Cup by choosing 1 out of 2 boxes containing food, while Achilles will be presented with bowls marked with team flags. European champions Portugal have arrived in Russia as their preparations for the 2018 World Cup enter the final stages. The Portuguese side, led by captain and talisman Cristiano Ronaldo, are based in Kratovo, which is a small village on the outskirts of Moscow. They opened their Group B campaign against Iberian rivals Spain in Sochi on Saturday. The Brazilian superstar Neymar will start his first match since February as the five-time world champions face Austria in their final friendly match ahead of the World Cup on Sunday. The Paris Saint-Germain forward, key to Brazil's fortunes in Russia, has played his first match since undergoing surgery for a foot fracture earlier this week, even finding the net in a 2-1 victory over Croatia. The Indian women's team is through to the finals of the Asia Cup for the 7th straight time after a 7-wicket victory over Pakistan in their final league phase match. Ekta Bisht took 3 wickets as India restricted Pakistan to 72 for 7 from 20 overs. Despite losing 2 early wickets in the chase, 30s from Smriti Mandhana and captain Harmanpreet Kaur saw India comfortably home. Now, the Indian team will now take on Bangladesh in the finals later on Sunday as they look to defend their Asia Cup title. Bangladesh are the only team to have beaten India in the tournament so far and could provide another stern challenge to India's title hopes. Well, let's get you some updates from the world of entertainment, where Bollywood actor Saif Ali Khan has been served a legal notice from Interpol with regards to the wild boar hunting case in Bulgaria. The Bulgarian police had recently booked an agent who allegedly had organized the hunt for him without permits and licenses. Reports also indicate that Saif's statement was recorded by the police just a month ago.